Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Evan Brand is a podcast host, certified functional medicine practitioner, and nutritional therapist. He's passionate about healing the chronic fatigue, obesity, and depression epidemics after solving his own IBS and depression issues. He uses at-home lab testing and customized supplement programs to find and fix the root cause of a wide range of health symptoms. His Evan Brand podcast has, I believe, over 7 million downloads and counting. He's the author of Stress Solutions, REM Rehab, and The Everything Guide to Nootropics. He offers free 15-minute functional medicine phone consults to discuss your health symptoms and goals at his site, evanbrand.com. Evan, pleasure to have you on the show today. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I guess I'd like to start with, can you tell us a bit about your personal journey? We know it's been a long one, and perhaps how you even came to be a functional medicine practitioner.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm still on the journey. There's no finish line, unfortunately, folks. So you just got to keep rolling ahead and keep trying to improve yourself. But started back in probably high school, really, but really started to pay more attention in college when I was in business school, dealing with depression and anxiety and sleep issues. That was really sort of the culmination of various things going wrong, gut infections, including various parasites, bacterial overgrowth issues that I had, working third shift, which is just terrible. It's a known carcinogen. Night shift nurses, for example, have 50% higher incidence of breast cancer than day shift nurses. So, I was going to bed at 5 a.m. and sleeping all day. And then I was, waking up at, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd go into work at midnight. I mean, it was crazy. So that led me to get off of night shift. It led me to clean up the diet, get the gluten, get the dairy out of the diet. And I had good success with that, but it's not going to cure everybody. If diet alone cured everybody or cured me, I'd be done. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing because it would have fixed me already. So I tell people cool, the food is medicine is great. I started out my practice working out of a chiropractor's office. I was just doing nutritional therapy. So food is medicine and then giving some digestive enzymes and basic supplements. And then eventually moved on into the functional medicine, took as many training courses as I was allowed to without being a medical doctor. And that's where I'm at now. So, the lab information is very critical because you've got these complex autoimmune disease cases and chronic fatigue epidemic and anxiety and depression, which are the number 1 and number 2 leading causes of disability in the United States, according to the Center for Disease Control. Anxiety just surpassed depression within, as we're talking, summer 2018. Anxiety just now took over as number 1 cause of disability. So you've got these major issues, and these are not a deficiency of antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. There are many underlying causes which you have to have diagnostic tools to find. So these could be infections, these could be mitochondrial issues, these could be liver detox problems, these could be cortisol issues, these could be various co-infections from ticks, Lyme, and mycoplasma, and cytomegalovirus, and Bartonella, and Babesia. I mean, there's a handful of stuff that can go wrong. So to just give everybody a drug is not the answer. Just like a naturopathic physician's approach may be not fully good either, because while they may not use drugs, they're more of a symptom supplement fix. And part of my journey was I went to more natural practitioners, but instead of getting the root cause, they would just say, okay, you have anxiety, take this supplement instead of this drug, or you have depression, take this supplement instead of this drug. But it wasn't, well, why is the issue there in the first place? And it took me a decade, literally, to figure this stuff out. And I'm still figuring it out because I had some random blood pressure spikes, several weeks ago, and got my blood checked because I thought, something must not be right. And my iron and ferritin levels were a bit too high. So now I'm looking into liver and looking into some of these other biomarkers for myself. And so it's a constant search, if you will, to make sure you've got all the puzzle pieces. And I think that's the hardest part for people, is finding those puzzle pieces, which is why 90% of the people that come to me, they've already been to 5 or 10 or 20 practitioners, and they've been through the ringer. And maybe they got a piece here or a piece there, and then we try to gather those pieces, and then we build upon those pieces to really figure it out.
It's an interesting point that you make, Evan, that you're sort of constantly reevaluating yourself and going, okay, it's not quite right at the moment. And, then it might be right. And then you have to recheck it again. So it's that constant sort of, I guess, adventure of life that you're on. But something interesting that you said there about anxiety and depression. So how would they actually, I guess, first of all, what is anxiety and what is depression? And then how do they actually measure that?
Yeah, good question. Well, most of the time you're going to go to maybe a general practitioner. You're going to get referred over to, I'm guessing, a psychologist, maybe a psychiatrist, and then you'll just talk with them. Now, there are some self-assessment scores. I don't deal too much with the mental health and the conventional aspect, so I don't know of all their logistics, but I'm pretty sure they do some type of a pre-screening or some type of like questionnaires to rate what they call like a perceived stress score, like a perceived anxiety score. And then based on that and just kind of doing a case review with those conventional practitioners, that's when they'll say, okay, you need a drug, which is the antidepressant or the anti-anxiety drug or both. And the other part of your question, I think I may have misheard it. I think I answered one part of your question, maybe not the other.
Yeah, so I was wondering, firstly, like how they actually measure it in terms of, I mean, I assume a lot of people with anxiety and depression don't even go to a doctor, so they don't actually know the stats. And then I also, I guess, wanted a bit of a definition from you in terms of what is anxiety.
So we'll get into the causes a bit. I want to jump to that, but first to define it, I would say anxiety would be feelings of worry, could be nervousness, could be like a gut tension, like you just feel kind of sick to your stomach, you feel like something bad's going to happen. Anxiety is almost like a sense of impending doom. I would rate impending doom as probably a severe manifestation of anxiety, but I would say that if you've got this unease, like I've got to do this, I don't want to do this, I've just got this nervous feeling getting through life, that's anxiety. How they measure it, I have no clue on the measuring outside of maybe some questionnaires. There's not like a test you can do. It's more of just an emotional thing that's happening. And then obviously there's many, many root causes, which my anxiety issues were primarily gut issues. And that's how I ended up resolving them.
And so how did you resolve them? You had IBS and I believe a level of depression.
Yeah. So I got, the conventional diagnosis of IBS, which means you've got issues with your bowels. We have no idea why. So let's refer you over to the gastro doc. The gastro doc just does what do they call it? The endoscopy, which I did not do, but conventionally they'll come in and do an endoscopy. They'll put the tube down your throat. They'll try to investigate and look for various infections. Most of the time, nothing comes back. Potentially mild gastritis comes back, which is a generic term for inflammation in the gut lining or the area there connecting to the small intestine. And then the question is usually, well, why? And their answer is, we have no idea. Maybe some bacterial stuff. You could potentially take antibiotics, and then you move on. So I didn't go that far down the rabbit hole. I did do the barium scan, which I don't really regret, but it was a waste of time with a gastro doc where you drink a terrible solution and then you lay down and you get, I believe it's an x-ray of your abdominal area, and they try to just look for any issues there. I believe it was to look for ulcers, but don't quote me. If you just type in barium scan, I'm sure you can figure out what they were looking for. This has been so long, I'm forgetting of why they were doing that. Just to investigate the gut issues. And of course, nothing comes back and you have no answers. So
did you then find a functional medicine practitioner to help you?
I did not. No, this was something I had to fix on my own. I did have a friend of mine named Dr. Justin, who's a chiropractor who's kind of branched out into functional medicine. He was instrumental in helping me to figure out what I should do protocol-wise. So, we started hanging out. We became friends after doing some podcasts together. And I went over to his house and he said, man, I think you've got parasites. And so he kind of nudged me that direction. We weren't really working one-on-one. We were just kind of hanging out together. And he mentioned it. Hey, you should probably get tested. So ran some testing and figured out I did have parasites and I had to fix those. And then also, once I got rid of the parasites, I retested. And then once I retested, I had H. pylori. And H. pylori is a bacterial infection. About 50% of the population has it. And the worst manifestation causes ulcers, stomach cancers, issues with the esophagus, issues with the LES, which is the lower esophageal sphincter. I mainly just had heartburn and I lost a bunch of weight. That was pretty much it. So treated the H. pylori, got rid of it, retested using herbs to get rid of it. And then I was clear. And then all the gut bugs were cleared and I just moved on. And then I worked into like a leaky gut healing phase because you could have all the perfect herbs to kill infections, but if you don't heal up your gut afterwards, you've kind of wasted your money. It's like, okay, you've cleared out the bad guys in the garden, but you didn't plant anything. So you just expect the garden to be healthy. You've got to clear the weeds out, then you've got to plant. So that's when the gut healing nutrients and probiotics and stuff came in, digestive enzymes, liver support, adrenal support. And then I was out of the woods pretty much from the major gut issues.
It sounds like you were blessed. I know many people, including myself actually, who had IBS, who went down a much longer path, I guess went from GP to GP. I suppose you see that a bit in your practice.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate, and I'm not against medical doctors. I'm just against the process of just ending up with drugs or surgery as your only options. And I had the prescription pad written, the antispasmodic drugs and all the conventional prescription remedies for the IBS to help manage it. But I'm just so anti-pharmaceuticals that I just denied everything. And I thought, okay, this is it. I'm at the end of the road. I did as much as I can with conventional medicine. I've been to the specialist now, the person with the white coat and all the fancy letters, and they still couldn't help me. So I had to do this on my own. And it's a very common story.
Can you give us an example of a few clients that perhaps have come to you after seeing a GP and sort of where they got to and where you helped them get to?
Yeah, so I had a lady in Dallas, Texas. She took a trip over to India just for fun and came back and had a lot of gut issues. I told her she had parasites. She was a college student, so didn't have a ton of money to run all the testing that we wanted. So in her case, we had to kind of pick and choose what testing we wanted to investigate. And I told her, because budget was a concern in her case, I told her to go to the conventional doctor. She ended up getting referred to a gastroenterologist specialist in Dallas at one of these prestigious hospitals. And it was like the head guy, like the head honcho. And he goes in there and he runs their conventional testing, which is called antigen-based testing or human microscopy, which is where you take a human and you put them in the lab and you get them to look at the poop all day and see if they see anything. And, what if they're scrolling on Instagram and Facebook like everybody else and they're not paying attention? So then they miss the bugs. So I don't like humans doing labs. I like machines doing labs. And so long story short, her test all came back clear. The gastro doc said, I have no idea what's going on with you. I'm sorry, I can't help you, and referred her to a psychiatrist. I believe, psychiatrists are the one that can prescribe. So he sent her to her to get on some type of mood stabilizer drug because she was having a lot of emotional problems. And so I said, well, that's BS. There's got to be a root cause. You went to India. I've seen it 100 times with travel that you can pick up infections, Mexico, Costa Rica, wherever. And nowhere. I've not been out of the U.S. and I still had infections. So you could be sitting in your backyard in, Burbank and still pick up bugs. It doesn't mean because you haven't traveled doesn't mean you can't have bugs. Our food supply is traveling for you. Look at your organic blueberries. Where are they from? They're from Peru. They're from Chile. They're from other places. Look at your pineapple. It's not from New York. It's from Costa Rica and other places. So just because you don't travel or just because you live a sheltered bubble lifestyle, which is awesome, doesn't mean you're any safer than anybody else. So we ran the DNA-based stool testing, which is about 20 years ahead of its time and 1,000 times more sensitive. And she showed up with multiple parasites. So created an herbal protocol, typically runs about 6 weeks, ran all the herbs, and resolve the issues. Cognitive stuff went away. That's one story. And then another story would be, this is pretty recent, then maybe the last month or two, a woman with 2 5-year-old twin boys who she was taking them out of school because all the teachers were complaining of the kids' attitude and, a lot of behavioral problems. So she sought me out and said that she'd heard me talk about gut health and mental health and the connection. And so we ran the stool test on her kids, and both kids showed up with multiple parasites and other infections, probably 20 total infections. These are various different bacterial overgrowth, things like Proteus and Citrobacter, Klebsiella, Prevotella, which causes joint pain. RA, rheumatoid arthritis, is triggered by a bacteria called Prevotella copri, COPRI. So they had Prevotella, they had all of it, and they were 5 years old. So we're still working on them. We're not fully out of the woods yet, but the kids are significantly better to the point that the mom said, what did you do to them? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, these kids they're different. They're not bouncing all over the walls anymore. They're chilled out. They can do their homework now, etc. So the influence of gut health on mental health is huge and something that I hope will become more common knowledge within the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, I'm actually constantly surprised that people don't even know what a functional medicine practitioner does or even exists. Can you, backtrack a bit and tell us, how do you actually become one? And then what is the actual difference between, say, yourself and a GP?
Yeah, so I'm not a medical doctor. I cannot diagnose. I cannot treat legally. My goal is investigate health problems and then find the root cause of them and fix them. So that's it. So I'm not a medical doctor. So that's one major difference is I did not go to medical school. In terms of becoming a functional medicine practitioner, there's a lot of different schools popping up. A lot of them have different medical doctors and osteopaths and chiropractors and other people on their advisory board. So, these people with these various schools, they'll gather various practitioners with expertise, and then they'll combine all of their knowledge into a course. Some of them are in-person workshops, some of them are online, some of them are mixed. I've taken, like I said, as many courses as I can without being a medical doc, and I've picked up some credentials and certificates along the way, which then opens the door for me to get access to lab testing. And then the lab testing is something that's critical for functional medicine because you can't fix what you can't find. So my philosophy is test, don't guess, because if you're like, oh, it's a gut issue, maybe it's this food sensitivity. Okay, try it. Try changing your diet. Okay, didn't fix it. Okay, well then there's something else. So let's get you tested. Do you have gut bugs? No, you don't? Okay, well then now what? So without the data, you're kind of just guessing and checking, and then you're buying random supplements because you heard it on a blog or a podcast, and you're like, okay, why is this magic supplement that so-and-so talks about, why is it not doing much? And it's because you're guessing. And so that's really the thing that I think separates the conventional medicine and the functional medicine world is diagnostics can be done in conventional medicine, but take a thyroid panel, go to your endocrinologist. They're not going to be running all the thyroid markers that matter. They're not going to run anything typically, unless you request it, typically more than TSH. Maybe they'll run your T4, maybe they run your T3, but I highly doubt they're running free T3, free T4. I guarantee they're not running reverse T3, which is a blank thyroid hormone. I guarantee they're not running TSI, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, which helps to detect some autoimmunity. I guarantee, unless you ask it, they're not running TPO and thyroglobulin antibodies and ferritin markers to look for anemias. I mean, this is the difference between, oh, I got lab tests done, everything looked fine, and oh, I got lab tests done, everything's not fine. Just because the lab was crap doesn't mean that you're fine. You can have perfectly normal lab tests and not feel fine because either you didn't have the right testing or enough deep testing run, or the reference ranges are too wide, or like I said, it's just a non-conclusive test. Like if you just run TSH for thyroid with a conventional doc, that's a very generic thyroid marker. I mean, that's equivalent to touching the sidewalk and estimating the forecast for the week. So it's just not accurate versus if you get the deeper stuff I mentioned, then you've got a much bigger picture. Okay, is this hypothyroidism autoimmune where the immune system is attacking the thyroid, or is there something else going on? And 90% of the time it's autoimmune. So you've got, women being diagnosed every day with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition. And this is primarily missed by conventional medicine. But because of education and the internet, we are able to transmit information faster. Therefore, these people that don't feel good are going to their endocrinologist and they're saying, hey, I need you to run this. I need you to run thyroid pyridoxase antibodies. I need you to run thyroglobulin antibodies. And some do, and some say, I don't know how to read that, so I'm not going to run it. And then you have to move on. But that's the difference.
That's a very common event all around the world, I find, with thyroid in particular. So that's interesting that you point that out. And also, like you said, the readings, they often say like it gets as high as 4, and they're like, no, that's actually a normal reading. And it's funny when you delve into where those readings actually come from and how they get what they class as normal.
Yeah, I mean, you could take somebody that's almost dead, you take their blood, and then you take somebody that's perfectly healthy, you take their blood, and then both of those get factored into the average. So now you've got this reference range that is so big that almost guaranteed when you get your blood work, you're going to be somewhere in that reference range. But, functional ranges are much tighter ranges. Like TSH, you want it to be around 2 would be nice. 1 to 2 would be good for TSH. If you're around 2, that's a pretty sweet spot. But if you're at 4, you could feel like crap when your TSH is at 4, but it's in the conventional reference range. But the functional reference range, that would fall out of the range, and that would indicate that you're under functioning. So this is important too, to make sure that when you say that your numbers are fine, are your numbers fine based on conventional or based on a tighter reference range?
So one of the, I guess, clear differentiators between yourself and a GP then is not only the type of testing, but also the, I guess, range of testing in terms of sort of a wider testing. Is that what I guess, the main
Yeah,
difference?
I would say it's a fair statement. I mean, I don't like to compare myself really to general, medical docs just because I'm not a medical doc. So I don't want people to think I'm a doctor and I'm not, I'm just a holistic practitioner. But I do have a wide toolbox that in 99% of the cases I've seen, it exceeds the toolbox of a conventional doctor. And that's not to say that I think I'm better. I'm just telling you that my success rate is better, and I'm telling you that the tools that I have are better. Does that mean I'm better? Well, I don't want to toot my own horn, but let's just say that with what I've done for myself and what I've done for, over 1,000 cases, I believe functional medicine has the answer for people. And that doesn't mean you need to work with me. There's other practitioners out there that you can access besides me that can help you with this. And I would just say if you're searching for a practitioner, a few key points that you want to look for are practitioners that are putting out content on a regular basis. So I put out a podcast every week. I've done this since 2012. And so if you find a practitioner, they've got a pretty face and a nice biography and they've got the credentials and the letters after their name, that's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean they can help you. So you really want to listen to them and make sure that they've got content, make sure they've got common sense, make sure you get a good feel from them, and make sure you get a feel that they know what they're doing and what they're talking about. I just had a client, which is why you and I were a little bit late starting this recording before you and I got on here. She had been listening literally to my podcast for 5 years before she reached out. And she's like, Evan, I know everything about you. And I'm like, whoa, I bet you do. And so she has already gotten so much free knowledge that she's already done all the low-hanging fruit. So now her and I get to cut straight to the chase and go into the deep dive stuff. Versus somebody that's not studying their practitioner, they may not get to act, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. So how easy is it to become a functional medicine practitioner? I guess what I'm really asking is how regulated is the industry?
Good question. I can't answer that because I'm kind of in my own little bubble with the clinic. I'm just so busy with it. I haven't really studied the industry as a whole. I'm sure there are probably other avenues out there that have functional medicine somewhere in the title that may not have an advisory board or anything behind them. So I don't know. I mean, there's stuff popping up all the time, but I don't think I'm qualified to answer the question.
But there's no set degree or anything that you actually need to call yourself a functional medicine practitioner?
Okay, so there are certain prerequisites that you must obtain before you can become functional medicine certified. A lot of the time it's nutritional therapy, it's a nutritionist, it's a dietitian, maybe a registered nurse. I think I mentioned that already. It's a chiropractor, it's an osteopath. Usually there's some type of credential, which is all of the courses I've taken. You have to have a pre-existing credential from an official place before you are eligible to take functional medicine courses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thanks for clarifying that. That does. So you mentioned thyroid and you've mentioned IBS. You've mentioned a fair few different types of parasites. What are the most common issues you're seeing in people today? Or is it too hard to define?
Oh, yeah, I would say it's primarily gut issues. I see hormone issues, but gut affects hormones. So if I had to just blame one category of health symptoms, I would blame it all on the gut because our food supply has antibiotics, our food supply has hormones. If you are not eating 100% organic, if you go to restaurants, you're getting conventional food. And if you're getting corn and rice and all these things that are sprayed with glyphosate and other pesticides, you're damaging your mitochondria, you're damaging beneficial bacteria in the gut. So there's people that are living in urban areas near highways, and you can measure their heavy metal levels, and their levels are higher. And the gut can influence how much you absorb or how much you can detox heavy metals. So every tangential health topic can all be rooted back to the gut.
So what process do you typically follow then to find out what the issues are? Obviously, you offer a 15-minute free consult, and then where to from there?
Yeah, so the 15-minute free call, that's with my staff. I have a nutritional therapist and a functional medicine practitioner on staff named Megan, who she takes care of all the 15-minute calls. And those are mainly just to help people talk about their symptoms and just figure out if they're a good fit for care. And then if they move into care, we end up scheduling a 1-hour paid consultation with those people. And that involves going through a pretty extensive, not boring, but pretty extensive intake form. And that asks all things about sleep, stress, environment, EMF. Do you talk on the cell phone? Do you have Wi-Fi? A lot of different questions for me to really get a good picture of what's going on with someone. I look at their address. I figure out where do they live? How close are they to highways? I study everything. How many cell phone towers are near their house? I study literally every aspect of environment because very important. And once we do that, then we go through some questions that I have for everybody. We look at previous lab results. If they have any within the last 6 months, generally we'll look at those to see if those are still valid. And then after that, what we do is we come up with labs. Okay, based on XYZ, we're going to look at this test. Typically, it's a urine, or typically it's a stool panel. Sometimes we're looking at saliva. Sometimes we're running blood panels. It just kind of depends. And then usually we follow up about 3 to 4 weeks later. We go over all those lab test results, and then we make a protocol. So if it's H. pylori, which is a bacterial infection, that's one protocol. If it's parasites plus bacteria plus candida plus viruses, plus Lyme disease plus thyroid issues, it's a totally different protocol. So what do we do next really depends on how strong is the person, how are they sleeping, how's their stress, how's their relationships, what do their lab results look like, are they sleeping? These are the questions that kind of go in when you're building out a protocol for people. And that could be diet, lifestyle, herbs, supplements, whatever we have to do to fix it. We're going to pull out as many tools as we can out of the toolbox.
And so once you've done those tests, how often do they need to come back and speak to you?
It depends on the case, but once we get the labs back, we do a protocol creation. We'll usually chat in 2-3 months after and follow up on the protocol. How did it go? Good. 80% better. Okay, great. Do we need to retest for infections? Well, I don't know. Let's figure it out. And then usually we'll schedule something 2-3 months later. So in a year's time, you got maybe 4 or 5 appointments, and that's enough to really dive in deep, but not to the point that we're talking, every month. It's something that we space out longer as well. As the person gets better, we'll kind of let the leash loose a little bit, and then we get to a point where we're just following up maybe 6 months or once a year if people just want like a general, what I call like a functional medicine checkup. I have a lot of people that just do that.
Excellent. And so obviously then you put them on the right sort of supplements and what have you. And I know your knowledge of supplements is quite sparse. And I'm very interested to ask you a little bit more along the lines of nootropics. You wrote a book all about it. And I wanted to talk to you about what's the difference. I mean, nootropics seems to be all the rage these days. What's the difference between, say, nootropics, smart drugs, supplements? What's your sort of definition?
Nootropic, however you pronounce it, I'm not too sure. I kind of say it both ways.
Aussies always say things the wrong way, so that's okay.
Well, no, I'm not saying you're saying it wrong. Yeah, I'm just saying I have no idea if I say it right. I call it nootropic, but some may call it nootropic. Anyhow, this was a term coined back in, I believe it was 1971. Just look up Wikipedia for nootropic and you can see this. But it was a term invented, which was a term that meant that a substance that was used for enhancing cognitive function could not cause any ill side effects. It could not be habit forming, cause addiction, for example, etc. And it's a really good term, and there's only a few things that fit into that term. Now, the industry being the supplement nutraceutical industry, has taken that term and diluted it and watered it down and sort of beat the term up. So now everyone claims that they have what they call a nootropic or a nootropic. However, a lot of these companies are using caffeine and other ingredients which are not nootropics, meaning caffeine is addictive. Caffeine can cause cardiovascular issues if it's, exceeded in certain doses, can be, negative for people. So you really have to study a bit and focus on, am I getting what's a true nootropic, or am I getting something that's marketed as that and it's really not? Now, smart drugs, some of those claim to be nootropics, some of them don't. Generally speaking, I would say as something marketed as a smart drug is generally someone that's going to admit and say, hey, it's not a nootropic. XYZ could have potential side effects. XYZ could have potential addiction, etc., but it can help your brain function. So smart drugs could be things that could be prescription as well, like modafinil, which is something that a lot of people get prescribed for, like helping their alertness. And a lot of people in Silicon Valley, California, engineers and people like that, they'll jump on that to try to help them perform better with maybe less sleep, or even if they get normal sleep, they'll just try to use it to get a competitive edge.
And so in summary, you speak about brain function a lot. What nootropics would you recommend? And I guess when I say recommend, and who would you recommend those to?
Unless the terminology's changed a bit and this no longer fits the bill, I would say the number one choice would be L-Theanine. L-Theanine is an amino acid that you get in green tea, and it really helps to work on the GABA receptors, GABA, GABA being the calming neurotransmitter of the brain, sort of the brakes of the brain to help you slow down and kind of downshift from life. Theanine can be great, and it's relatively safe at even higher doses, but typically you just need to look at anywhere between maybe 50, 200 milligrams given in that range. That's a typical dose you're going to find on a supplement bottle. And when you start to work on these GABA receptors, you can help your cognitive function because it helps you to not feel so overwhelmed. It can help burnout victims. It can help people that are just overworking. It can help anxiety type issues. So theanine, I would say, is probably my top choice.
Awesome. Look, that is really interesting. And I know people can go and get your book from Amazon or any other good bookstore, and we'll put all that in the show notes.
Yeah, somebody gave me like a 3-star review or something, and they were like, hey, this should be called like the encyclopedia of nootropics instead because it's too general. And it's like, look.
I read that, and they were complaining that you didn't talk about stacks. And
yeah,
so
let me address the hater and any other potential haters. Look, I'm not going to go and give you some protocol that you're going to take and then you're going to come back to me and say you have heart palpitations or you have XYZ symptom. As you know, which sounds corny, but it's true, everyone's different. So I'm not going to go and give, hey, here's my supplement stack. These are the exact 5 supplements I use. Here's the dosages. Here's the time of the day I take them. Follow my lead. I'm not going to do that. So what I did instead was I educated people about dozens and dozens and dozens of different formulas. And I say, okay, research these on your own, but here's what they can do. Here's the benefits. Here's the potential downsides. And then you piece it together or you hire somebody to help you. But that would be just ludicrous, especially, as a practitioner, for me to just put a protocol out for the world to just everybody go take Evan's brain stack and see how they do. That's my brain chemistry that I'm supplementing.
It's funny you say that. I was actually going to write a similar response back to that person.
Please do it. I would love you to add to the conversation. This is something that like people want the silver bullet like that. Just give me the quick fix. Let me pay $5 for the protocol or whatever. It's not that simple. If it were, I wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. It's like, Evan, so what do you eat? That's what I'm going to eat from now on.
Yeah. It's like, you could follow a template like mine and probably do okay, but not going to guarantee anything.
No surprises there. So I guess, Evan, before I let you go, I'd love to ask you, what sort of advice would you give based on all your knowledge, based on all the clients that you see? Is there anything, I guess, just as a couple of tips that you could pass on to us?
Yeah, get a stool test. It's called the GI map. Number 2, get an organic acids test. It's from Great Plains Laboratory. It's a urine sample. And then I would probably get a cortisol panel run too. And just investigate and see what's going on. I guarantee you're going to have some issues to fix.
Excellent. Look, I really appreciate that. And one little question before I let you go, finally, is a question we ask all the guests on the show. Do you have a tattoo?
I do not. No, heavy metals are in tattoos. They're toxic. So I don't recommend tattoos. My wife has 2 of them, but that was before I was able to educate her not to do it. So
Dr. Dan came on the show and he said the same thing. So I thought you might have a similar answer.
Yeah. But now if I had one, would I try to do anything about it? Probably not. I'd probably just take some extra liver support or something.
Excellent. Look, Evan, thanks again for coming on the show. We're going to put your website in the show notes so people can come and have a 15-minute consult.
Sure. Yeah. And people, if you want to check out the podcast, just Google Evan Brands. You'll see, almost 300 episodes. It's all free. So just go study. I'm sure there's a subject or an entire hour dedicated to a specific question you may have. So just go search the library, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with your audience, and hopefully this has been helpful for them.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Evan.
Thank you.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.